You're listening to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Cruikshank. Our podcast brings you information and resources to enhance the therapeutic effects of your practice based on a deeper understanding of anatomy, physiology, and the integration of modern science and research with traditional practices and experiences. Join me and my co-hosts, Rachel Land and Katya Barch, as we dive into all things yoga, research, and wellness. The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs. All right, we are back, and I'm very excited to finally have Amanda on here and chat about Seva and have a more personal, conversational chat about the nonprofit that we run and really talk about some things that I think are incredibly interesting and incredibly important to me as a yoga teacher. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our nonprofit foundation, which is the Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation. We're going to talk about how it's evolved over the years. We're going to talk about human trafficking and kind of a little bit of the ins and outs of it, and a quick summary, of course. And then we'll talk about our main projects going on, the purpose of our projects and our trips that we do, our favorite parts, and how you can support this cause. If you're interested, like we are, and you want to get involved, we'll go over a little bit of all that. So let's start by talking about Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation and how it started in, I always forget the date. I think it was 2015. Amanda's better at keeping track.
2015 was our first trip to India. And I think when you really wanted to start something that felt like yours and like it was going to build the community. So it started in 2015. I think we made it official in 2017.
And I think the reason it's always blurry in my head, because that was when we actually went on the trip. And so the planning for the trip, which you were on our very first trip, and that's how we connected and you got involved with us. But the planning for it was obviously usually a year or so before that too.
Right. Yeah.
But I know for me, so I grew up my mom worked at a homeless shelter. And so I think from a very young age, I really saw and felt the importance and the impact just of doing nonprofit work. And so for me, it really put things in perspective in a lot of different ways. Then fast forward to my work at Nike, when I was working at Nike, and they had a nonprofit called The Girl Effect and a little video. And I had never really been introduced or thought much about human trafficking, living in my, privileged world where I had, not a lot of things like that to worry about. And so for me, seeing and learning a little bit more about trafficking through that was really what turned me on to this importance and need for it. I think as a female, I can't imagine any greater injustice, especially than sex trafficking. Obviously, there's human trafficking and sex trafficking and all different types of trafficking that can happen with males and females. But for me, it really just stuck with me. I couldn't walk away from it if I wanted to, just thinking about not being able to have a choice and the impact of this industry, which is huge. And then also through them, also learning the importance of vocational skills and education to break that cycle. So giving people the skills to also leave that industry. And we'll talk a little bit more about trafficking later and the importance of it and kind of the cycle of it. But that was really impressionable on me. And then I was running our teacher trainings, our 200 hour and our 500 hour. And I just kind of felt like there was something missing. We had all these programs. We had such a great, robust and deep training. But for me, teaching has always been a service. And I started teaching in the 90s. And, it really was about giving up any attachment to money or fame, or, so for me, teaching yoga really was a service. And I think it's so important to keep remembering that, because nowadays there's this kind of feeling of having to perform as a yoga teacher and having to have this reach and, expand. There's just so much to it as a yoga teacher. And I think remembering that it's a service kind of puts things in perspective. And, I wanted to bring that to our teacher trainings. Also, I wanted to give back to this culture that gave us everything, gave us yoga. And so it started
Yeah.
out as our teacher, as part of our teacher training.
Yeah, and I love it. It's kind of like the coming together of all things that you're passionate about. And timely, like if you think about it now, we're even where I live in South Carolina, we're trying to keep our right to our body. And that's just one right that we're fighting here in the States. And the idea that women all over the world have zero right, zero autonomy, no access to education or ways to choose, I think is incredible. And then yes, I mean being in the yoga community and knowing that everything we do and learn about and teach to our students and the way we live our lives stems from India. And so I love that it kind of all comes together and just forms this great synergy.
And I mean, I think one of the things I love about yoga too is it really does kind of open us up to really being empathic, really caring about the people around us. And so, I think it really fits in. And as a human, this desire to kind of give back and have this relationship to our environment, both near and far, that is about us helping each other, that is really about us supporting each other. And sometimes that's, you know, very directly, and sometimes that's energetically or more indirectly. But I think as a yogi, it's such an important part of our practice in a lot of different ways as well. So, and, just I'll drop a little factoid right now before we get there. But, I think everyone thinks, well, human trafficking is everywhere. And yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the States as well, which is kind of mind blowing to think of it happening so much in the US. And yes, it does happen here. But I think what's so significant about this too is that worldwide, there's approximately 50 million people that are trafficked at any given time. And in India, there's 20 million of those. So like the the largest congregation and the place that really, really, really needs our support. And I think if you've been to India, you can just sense, especially in the bigger cities, how easy it is to just disappear.
Yeah, and Calcutta, I never knew this until we went, is the epicenter of trafficking in the world. So our work is at the source.
Yeah, I love that. So obviously meaningful in the realm of yoga, also meaningful in the realm of human trafficking. So much great stuff to do there, and always more work, as you can imagine. 20 million people, there's always more work to be done, but big progress that's been made too. We've felt it over the years as well. And, our foundation has evolved a lot over the years as well. It started out with one retreat. I remember actually what happened was, so I was interested in this. I had already, been connected with that girl effect and was interested and looking for. And then one day I was teaching at a yoga journal conference, and someone came up to me and they were leading these, what they called nonprofit retreats. And so I was so excited to be able to just kind of lock and load, because as you know, like a big part of it is just getting to know the areas and where to take people, and taking people to India is not an easy undertaking because you want to make sure everything's safe and supported and seamless and easy for people, as you know. And so I went with them, and it was great. That's how I met you. That was how I got introduced to a lot of the nonprofits there, like Women's Interlink and Rescue Foundation, who do such great work there.
We still work with, yeah, all these years
Yeah,
later.
I know.
Yeah,
And
I
then,
remember that. And
oh yeah, go ahead.
well, I think, yeah, we realized on that trip, like just how, the magnitude of what was happening in Calcutta and with all these foundations, and realized that there was a portion, and not that nonprofits don't need to profit, they do to sustain, but they were getting a little too much money. And we
Yes.
wanted to find a way to streamline it, right? To almost like just cut out a third party and say, okay, we're going to raise this
Yeah.
money and we want it to go directly to these foundations and in the hands of these women.
And I mean, I'm so grateful for them because they really did help us get started. I don't know, it would have been so much work for me to make all those connections, especially from here, and get all that going. So it really was a really great jump start for us. But like you said, I think 75% of the income, and Yoga Medicine wasn't touching the money, but like 75% of it was going to the people, the company running it, which they were a little private about. It was a little strange, but eventually we realized, no, we need to streamline this. And then we met Her Future Coalition, who is a very close partner of ours now, who we work really closely with, and who also has a lot of partners there. At the time, they were mostly doing jewelry making, I think. That was kind of their big focus, which was really amazing. I know for me, it really caught my eye because as someone who had been to India several times before, I knew really well how um, valued and respected being a goldsmith was there. Is kind of one of the most highly revered jobs, and really only men who do it.
Men, right?
So it was cool
Yeah,
to
yeah.
see
So to
them
see
doing it.
female, yeah, and the empowerment they feel from that, of like knowing that they're breaking glass ceilings. That they themselves are now the metalsmiths and making beautiful pieces that other people wear.
I know, and you see the look on their faces. You can just tell that they are confident and like proud, right, of being a breadwinner for their family and being able to provide. And it's been cool to watch Her Future grow too and expand, because now they're doing so much more than just the jewelry making. I know that's just a small part of what they do, and now they have a center that we've partnered with and helped out with as well, which is really cool to see, having their own location. I know Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation and Her Future have both helped support a lot of other shelters over the years. Her Future obviously has been around a lot longer. But that's really fun to do, but then there's so much out of your control that can go wrong or go slow, right? Like, you can speak to that probably more than me, but it's nice to now have our own place, which makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, and the new space is like one of a kind, or first of its kind in Calcutta. It's like a co-working space where all of these nonprofits can come together that share the same mission or are aligned in what they're doing. And it's a huge resource for the community and will continue to be. But yeah, it's definitely nice to be able to have a space that you feel like is yours. And because of that, I think the culture within that center is that it's theirs too. Like, they take ownership of it. They want to keep it clean. They want to be there every day. And that, I think that's really important too, just a space that also makes them feel like it's theirs or it's home. I was
Yeah.
going to say, and I'm jumping ahead, but a lot of times people will say like, well, can't I just send money, or why India, or why the trip? And one of the things that you touched on, and I think is so important, is this point of connection, right? Like actually connecting face to face, eye to eye with someone that you're giving to, and that person knows that they're receiving it. But there's so much disconnect in the world, and I think it's such an important aspect of these trips, is that we get to show them energetically with hugs, smiles, buying their artisan goods, their jewelry, that we care, that they're valuable, that they are valued. And there's something, well, you said, like, you can see them radiate this joy when you pick up a piece of their jewelry and try it on and want to buy it. And that is really special, and I think it is a huge part of the trips.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, I think it sounds small, but when you get there, you feel it and you get it. Like, you're there. And, it's such a big thing too for them. They know we're coming from all the way around the world to see them. Like, what a sweet gift. And I think a lot of times in the nonprofit world, I feel like a lot of times people want to go on trips to like paint walls or build houses. But,
Build a
in
toilet.
in India, that stuff is so cheap. It's like it's silly because it's not a good use of our time or our money to get there. And so, really what it's about is not painting walls or building things like we really want to do because we want to feel like we've contributed something. But it really is about being there and seeing where our money's gone and having that connection and letting them know that we care. Like it's priceless. You can't put a number on that. And yeah, not everyone needs to come visit. It's not the most efficient way because you do have to pay for a plane ticket to get there. But for the people who really are interested in supporting and are fundraising a lot of money and have a lot of donors helping them out, like it's very important to go and see where your money's going, especially when you're sending it to India, like, or anywhere that's far away, like actually go see it and know. And it was so
See it in
impactful for me.
action.
Yeah, to go. So this new center came about during COVID. It was in a rundown building, and Amanda was a big part of this with other people, a lot of other people as well, of completely like redoing this building. And we have two huge floors that have, I mean, you can speak to, the level of.
Yeah. Yeah, we did it during COVID. It's I'm so proud of it, and it was an incredible experience. But Nafisa, who is our country manager in India, found this space, and it's a heritage building. It was completely run down. It actually has 5 floors, but we have the first 2 floors. But even those 3 floors, sorry,
Oh,
is
yes, you're right.
10,000 square feet and 23 rooms, bathrooms on every floor. And we had a very small budget. We couldn't travel during COVID. So everything was done via Zoom. And you have to think there's like a 10 and a half hour time zone difference, a cultural barrier, a budget barrier, like all these things. And we got it done. We renovated it, furnished it, and opened the doors. And I think it under a year.
It's incredible.
And it was incredible. I worked with someone locally where I'm at who designed every single room from like plugs in the wall to the ceiling color. And then we had Rim Jim in India, who was a female contractor, which was also really unheard of, and still is pretty unheard of. So we were really, proud to work with her. And,
I mean, it's pretty amazing when you look at the before pictures. And I even had seen the before and after before I went and saw it, obviously, because it was done when we got there this last time, and COVID had been going on all through it. And then like even seeing it in person though was just like, holy cow, the level of detail and the tiles. They refurbished these gorgeous tiles that were in there already. And like what you guys did with such a small budget, virtually was like,
yeah,
mind blowing. And you can see it in all the girls there. Like they are just so happy to be a part of it. They had the girls in the bakery cooking us food, and it was like some of the best. That quiche, that was the best quiche I've ever had. Hands down.
Oh God, the bakery and hospitality vocational training is one of my favorites. I just think that the women are specifically chosen for that program who have recently been rescued. So high level of needs, and it's a 6-month program, and we've already seen the first batch come out of that. And 3 were placed in jobs, which is incredible. We've hired one of them who wasn't totally ready to go out into the world, but we'll do some admin work and stay in the space. And then they just started their second batch of girls. And I mean, from seeing them on day one when they walk in, and they're still in that space of, they need so much. They're coming with all of this trauma, and not to say that 6 months heals all of it, but it's like watching a flower bloom. They come in, and how they leave is so different.
And I think really it's a good point too to just mention, what's really important to us. And this was why I really connected with Sarah, who runs Women's Her Future Coalition, and yourself and myself all really jived, was that for me, what was really important was pairing them up with vocational skills to give them something to support themselves for a lifetime, but also in a way that was that was meaningful to them. It wasn't just spice grinding. It also was in a way that brought them above the poverty line, which spice grinding doesn't usually do. And so like becoming a goldsmith, though it takes years of training, is definitely something that will bring them above the poverty line and is a good investment, because then they can do it the rest of their lives. We have some that want to go to college that we then find a way to fund their college. We have there was one that went to law school that was like, I want to fight for other women like me. And that was like, of course, it's just like your heart just swells, just thinking about it. Others who want to get married, and they do end up they find someone they want to get married to. And that is expensive and really important in India. It's such a really important and precious thing to them. And so finding ways to support that. So what I love about what we do is it's not just about one shelter. We work with other people who run shelters like Women's Interlink and Rescue Foundation, who does all the legal work trying to rescue women, which is a whole nother process. But then we also have our center now, which provides vocational skills. And then we can also, this is a harder thing to wrap your head around, because I think as someone who's donating money, you want to know exactly where it's going. But what's beautiful with the money that we do raise is that we can then, if we have a girl who wants to go to law school, find some money to pull together to help them go to law school. Like it can be really individualized instead of this like formulaic, like jacket that everyone has to fit into. And to me, that's what's really meaningful. And I assume, and maybe it's just my assumption, but I think that's part of what we see in their eyes and their spirit, is them feeling like they're becoming themselves and being supported as who they uniquely are. Which is, I think, just makes my heart swell up a little bit. So,
yeah. I mean, they have a choice for the first time ever, and I think that it's overwhelming and empowering. And I think you can give to Red Cross, and you'll never ever know where that money goes. Not as if they don't do good; they do amazing things. But what's special about Seva is that it's still small enough that we are very much connected in a community, and you do see where your money goes. And I think during COVID, not that other nonprofits or larger nonprofits didn't do this, but I was able to call you and say, listen, this 10,000 that we said was going to go here, needs to go here to save lives. Like, is that okay?
yeah.
And it's like, sure, let's do it.
Especially
And,
in COVID, because like I remember all our girls had to get tablets, which was unheard of before. No one had that. And if they didn't have that, they wouldn't be in school. They would lose their educational skills. They'd fall. I mean, like on goes the spiral, and eventually back into that cycle. And so keeping them in school is such a huge part of it. And so, yeah, getting them those tablets, like in COVID, we had to like really rethink things.
Yeah. And I mean, even in COVID, like we started supporting families rather than individual girls with basic needs, because if a family is desperate, they do desperate things. And it's like, okay, let's get the family food so they don't feel like hunger is their priority, and ensure that they stay a family unit and safe. And so, I think Actara, which is another partner, it's a middle school aged school in the slum community of Sanagachi. But we were, as a group, all of these nonprofits, Seva and Actara, able to support all 250 families that were sending their girls to school, and all 250 girls came back to school. Not one was trafficked.
Oh my
and
gosh.
it's incredible, when people.
And it was hard because it was a matter of also getting the food to them, because depending on where they lived, their access because of COVID sometimes was really, really challenging. And it was cool that, we had the capacity as a smaller nonprofit to evolve and adapt and find out what does this person in this neighborhood need and how are they going to get their food versus this person in this neighborhood that has a different setup, because some people were getting rations and some people weren't, and some people had access to go and walk and get things and others did not. Like, it just seemed like, from my perspective, and you were probably on more of those, you were definitely on more of those calls than I was, but it was so different from one person to another. And yeah.
Yeah, it was scary, but I feel like our communities, like we were just honest too. I that's another thing I love about being this size and this kind of community is like you can just be honest and say, look, we need this money for this now. And yeah, I mean, we 250 girls stayed
It's
in
amazing.
school, and that's not a small thing. Yeah.
No. No, and I think one thing that was really interesting to me too, that I learned from you and from her future recently, was that, in the past, the government has been so much a part of this. And it's been so hard for Rescue Foundation, who does a lot of the rescue work, to get people out because of that. And I think one thing, and clarify if I'm not being totally accurate, but one thing that I thought was really interesting was that the government is actually being more proactive now. But the problem is, a lot of these shelters now are being turned into just a 1 year long program, which really isn't enough, and no follow up. I mean, that's one of the things I love about our programs is we follow people up to make sure they're in a good home, make sure they're not in a bad place again, make sure they're supporting themselves like years later, to make sure that
Right.
it's still going. We're not just like, here's your year, goodbye. Good luck.
Yeah. And sometimes the government's even saying, and they change, their rules or laws quite often, which is also um, hard for us. But they sometimes are even saying less than a year, like 6 months. And we're talking about some of the worst trauma ever experienced in life, and um, 6 months is not enough for anything. And so there's no end to the cycle. It just continues to be a vicious cycle. Why rescue someone out of a brothel or out of a different scenario just to throw them right back into it? And yeah, I think that we all align on that idea of, we of course need shelter and basic needs, which is why a portion of what we bring in goes to that. But that the real key to freedom is remedial education and vocational education,
Yeah.
to be able to stop that cycle.
So let's talk a little bit about trafficking. I think there's obviously, this could be like 5 whole episodes on its own, but just like, I think succinctly, it's always been really surprising to me, especially when I first learned about this, just how it happens. I think we just assume from like the Taken movies and things like that, that people are
I
being
know those
snatched and
darn Taken
drugged
movies.
and they're being
Mhm.
drugged and held against their will. But it's really not the full story, especially in most of the places that we're working in India.
Definitely not. Yeah, those Taken movies did nothing good for the
Well, at least
anti-trafficking
it
world.
got us interested. I think, it's always something there. But yeah, it's not accurate. Not most of the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, most of the time we're talking about um, absolute poverty, extreme poverty scenarios where children are could be sold by their family to do some form of trafficking because the family is that desperate that they have no choice. Um, a
And
lot of
so
times
just to
the
clarify, when
family,
we say trafficking, that could be sex trafficking, that could just be more of a form of human slavery. Um,
child
Anything else?
marriage
Oh yes, child
is, yeah,
marriage.
child marriage, rag pickers, street pickers, like street beggars. I mean, like when we go to India and we ask our groups, like, please don't give to the street beggars. That's because it is a scheme set up of some form of trafficking. Someone's making that child going out, or even abusing that child so that they look worse to beg on the street. And so just to not be a part of that cycle. But so you have, yes, you have child marriage, and sometimes a family in a remote area that maybe doesn't have any resource at all will think that selling their girl into a brothel, or thinking and being told that that might be, you know, domestic duties, like working in someone's house and being a maid or a chef, is better than child marriage. And so it's like, you know, as a family unit, they're like, well, do we want our 12-year-old to be married, or do we want to send her off and hope that that job is better? But and then there are those scenarios too, where, you know, you have child labor all over Asia. So it's not just sex trafficking. It's not just brothels. There's a lot of ways to be enslaved in today's world.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too, because a lot of times, from my knowledge, a lot of times these girls are trafficked by their families, and sometimes their family knows. Sometimes they think they're going to actually do some sort of work and they're making money and sending the money home. Sometimes maybe they do know that they are being sold into sex trafficking and either just desperately need the money or maybe are somehow involved somehow. And so, you know, there's all these different scenarios, and the child really believes that they're doing this for their family and that money is being sent home. And sometimes, I'm assuming, my understanding is that most of the time it probably isn't even being sent home. So,
yeah. And I mean, Anjali is a great example of that. She lived in a really remote village in Nepal, and her father had died, and her mother had mental health issues. And like at the age of 8 or 9, she knew who the traffickers were when they came to the village, and she would hide. But eventually I think it was her uncle, it was someone in her family who did sell her at the age of 12. And she had never been told about sex. She didn't even know, you know, that it existed, or what it was, or what she was going to do. She just knew, my family sent me here. And, you know, there's a lot of things happen from point A to point B, but she was put into a brothel at the age of 12, thinking, oh, this must be what the work is. Like, this must be what my family wants me to be doing. And so there's this, like, you know, this mental level of like, oh, I want to help my family. They sent me here, so I'm going to stay here. I'm going to do what they tell me to do, and my family's going to get money.
yeah.
And yeah, the families are never getting any money, or will ever even know that they've crossed the border from Nepal into India, or vice versa.
And I think there's two things to that. One is, like, it was always really interesting to me that part of that is educating them that this is not something that they have to do, that this is not the way that it, like, really teaching them that they don't have to sell their body, that they, you know, educating them around that. But then I think the other part of it is, you know, sometimes it's not necessarily the family that's doing it, is that it's sometimes these relationships that are being made with these kids in the slums that maybe aren't going to school. So they're just hanging around because their mom wants them to do chores around the house. And then they're more susceptible to coming in contact with the people who run the brothels, who are then just slowly building relationships with them, giving them a little piece of candy every couple of days, or like building their trust, and then eventually getting them to come over, which is why it becomes more complicated too, because it's not as easy as just getting some of these women out of this, because it is these relationships they've created. It's their beliefs and education around it. It's also just their feeling of home.
The stigma of the culture.
And
there's so
and the
much
stigma
that goes.
I mean, that's such a huge part of it. Like in India, I mean, here we're like, I mean, obviously there's some stigma here too, but we feel empowered to be able to get out of that. And maybe some people even feel courageous and brave for overcoming it. And there it's like, it's such an incredible stigma.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, if you don't, let's say you're Anjali and come from Nepal into India and you don't speak the language, but you know, now you're in a different country and you're in that country illegally, you're terrified for a lot of different things. I mean, if the police are coming in and using your services, when they come in for a raid, it's not like you're going to jump into their arms, nor are you going to be really, you know, amped to say like, oh, I'm in this country illegally. There's so many levels of, yes, even how a raid is sometimes done is rebuilding the trust in the opposite way of like, actually, I'm not going to hurt, men undercover, like coming in, I'm not going to hurt you. You don't have to do this. Like building the trust in the opposite way. So then when the raid does happen, they're willing and ready to go.
And one of the things I love about our programs, both the people we partner with, like Her Future and other partnerships we have there, is that it's looking at all sides of this. So one, it's looking at the children before they get trafficked, both female and male, because the males are also brought into this as a way to help bring females in too and help run the brothels. And so getting to the kids before they get trafficked and keeping them in school. Number one, keeping them in school, doing whatever we need to help them stay in school. But then two is the girls. And because prostitution is legal in India, a lot of it is focused on rescuing the younger girls who are underage, because that is not legal if they're under 18. And so getting proper, correct birth certificates for them, that's more of Rescue Foundation's job, but rescuing these girls, rehabilitating them, that might be through shelters or vocational skills in the vocational programs in the red light district. But then also for women who are older who want to leave, right? Programs for women who are over 18 who want to have vocational skills and want to get out of that and want to be able to support maybe their children now that they've had, or their families. And then there's the last phase of it too, is the women, once you hit 40, you're kind of no longer wanted in this industry anymore. And so now they have nothing to do and no way to support their families and their children. And, and so also looking at supporting them with vocational skills and helping them out. And I think, it's this whole evolution of it that's important. And, each part is also very important.
Yeah. I mean, it's a holistic look at healing, like healing to success, from survivor to thriver. Like you do need all of those pieces of the pie to output a girl or a woman and see her be successful. A lot of times the older women, this is why the resource centers next to the brothels became a thing, is because, we went in and also what I love about us and our partners is that we don't come in with like this Western idea of like, this is what's going to work. Like we come in and we say like, we want to help you, tell us what will help you. And a lot of the women in the brothels had their children in the brothels, and it wasn't necessarily that they wanted, saved or rescued. It was that they didn't want their children watching this abuse and being, so much more vulnerable to that abuse.
Yeah.
And so that's how the resource centers were birthed, so that when the women were working, there was a place for their children to go and they could be safe and warm and get an education and healthy food and not see the abuse that was happening to their mothers.
And also potentially I'm assuming that some of them just want to break the cycle for their kids. At least maybe they feel like they, are kind of stuck in it, and maybe at some point they come around too. But, we're all doing the best we can. And so I love that we partner with a bunch of different, like no one can do all of that, but to be able to, right. It's like this really beautiful little nonprofit family I feel like we have there. Her Future Coalition is one. We've got the resource centers for the children in the red light districts. That's another one. We've got the resources, the actual shelters that house the women who've been rescued. We have now our own center with Her Future, that is more of a vocational center. So there's no one living there, but it really is about vocational training, which again is really the big thing, whether they're young or medium or old, whether being trafficked or out of it. So it's like the vocational skills are so important, but looking at all these different resources there and working together and doing our best to, pull together what's needed when it's needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like when you own a business, like you wish that you could be good at all parts of it, but you're just not, right? Like, maybe you're good at the speaking part or the selling part or the accounting part. And, we look at it the same way. And it's so often we'll get a call from another nonprofit, like, that got someone and was like, this is really your specialty, not ours, and we'll do the same thing. And that's beautiful because again, we're listening to what that individual needs and then finding the sources that best fit that survivor.
Yeah. It's really cool to watch that with the nonprofits, the camaraderie between different nonprofits, which is, you know, what it's all about. And yeah. What else? I
Yeah.
think we had some statistics too that are also really interesting. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about the trips a little bit because I think that's a really
Okay.
interesting part of what we do. I mean, we did the trips again. These kind of started as part of our teacher trainings. I thought it was important as a yoga teacher to give back and to put things in perspective and to go and get a sense of also of India, but then this nonprofit work. But it's really turned into a way for us to really work with our community in yoga medicine and really create a big fundraising movement. And so we, for our fundraisers who, well, this does change a little bit, but I think right now, or this last time, it was people who raised $5,000 were eligible to come join us on the trip, which means they have their expenses on the trip paid for, and they have to pay their own airfare. But to come and, you know, see what they've done. These are our bigger donors. So we thought it was really important for people who are able to fundraise a big chunk of money, or even just pay it. There's sometimes people will just pay it themselves. To go and see the impact, to go and see the women and connect with them like we talked about and really feel that impact that they're having and you know, going and visiting the shelters. So we'll go and visit obviously our center that we work with and then the other shelters, and they can hear a little bit more information about what's going on and how the programs work, and then they can bring pictures back to their donors.
Right. I mean, it's a ripple effect. It's not only an experience for the beneficiaries to see who cares, but it's an experience for the donor to see their money in action and to actually like look at the soul, look at the person of who they're helping and how they're helping. And then that person goes home. I mean, there's no way you come home from these trips and you're like, I'm not going to think of that again. You know, it becomes like part of your being, right?
Yeah.
And then you become a ripple effect. You come home with this passion and this information and these photos, and you start to talk to your community, and that community starts to talk to its state, and you know, it ripples out. There's long-term benefit to coming and seeing firsthand.
Yeah. And I know because we do it usually every 2 years. And I know even for myself, I've been to India, I don't know, 8 times or so now. And I don't know, was that we've done 4 of these trips, I think. But even now, it goes usually 2 years between the trips. And at the end of those 2 years, I'm always like, we really should just focus on raising money. It's so much more efficient just to put all the money in there. You know, we keep our costs down for the trip so that most of that $5,000 goes to, you know, to the programs.
You're so right.
But then you get there and you're like, oh yes, that's right. Yes. And it like, you can't leave and not be impacted by it forever. You know, whether you go again or not, whether you fundraise again or not, like it's with you. But most people come back really changed by it, you know, and not just in the fundraising realm, but like in their lives. I mean, I think it's, you know, it's great to put our lives in perspective, which who doesn't need from time to time, but then you come back so, you know, full of joy for these girls and really like wanting to help more, which is really important because as you can see, like the work never ends. So
I mean, it's the same for me, and this is my, you know, my full-time job. So I had been there in October of 2022, and so when our trip was coming up, I'm like, oh my, you know, it felt so close. Like, and it's huge. You know, it takes 2 days to get there. It's 10 and a half hour time zone difference.
you're like,
And
oh,
I'm facilitating. It's nerve wracking. I want everyone to have this incredible present experience. But yeah, every single time it's exactly the same. I come back and I'm like, oh, like this is why I do this. You know,
yeah.
it's re-energizing, and it like refills your cup of like passion or like
Yeah,
need to give up, need to give back. Like it fills that cup.
I agree. I will never forget the first time Forrest came with, and we didn't really think about it ahead of time because he just wanted to go. And I just remember, I don't know why it didn't hit us until we showed up to the first shelter and we were about to get off the bus, and Forrest just looked around and he's like, oh my God, I'm the only man. And he was so nervous and so worried. And I was too, a little bit, because, these girls have only had, well, probably mostly negative experiences with men, for many of them. And he
Yeah.
got out. I just remember him getting out of the bus and standing there, and these girls who were much smaller than him, pretty much all of them, looking up at him with these big eyes. And he was so nervous. Like,
Plus these like kind of light skinned and lighter
yeah,
hair and
and
a
big.
bigger man. And
Yeah. But by the end, I mean, what were we there, like 2 hours? By the end, with the very end, we were doing the henna
the
tattoos, we
henna.
always do. And each one of us girls had one person doing nice little henna tattoos on us. And he had like 6. He was so proud because he left with tattoos. He thought they would just be like under his work shirts, and or on his legs or his arms. And they had like painted all up his neck. And I just remember him going back and being so proud to be able to talk about these girls because it made such a big impact on him. And, he wanted to share. You want to share. He's wearing his necklace this time. He got with that necklace and he
I love
wears
that
it.
necklace.
And it's just those little memories that you bring back.
And I think it's important too for like those girls, for the beneficiaries, to see a gentle, kind man. Not only I like that you and him are in a relationship, because it's not only a gentle, kind man to them, they can also see how he's gentle and kind to his partner, to the woman that he loves.
Yeah.
And I think, both of those things over the years, we've tried to incorporate more of that to see, the impact of that. And I always say, we're not going to end trafficking in my lifetime or my kids' lifetime. Like that's not a realistic expectation. But what we're doing is,
but it's our goal.
A seed. It's our goal, sure. But we're planting a seed in a culture, and not just India, everywhere, this deeply ingrained belief that women are less than and men can treat women less than. And like we're planting these seeds everywhere we go in all these different ways, whether it's the way that Forrest loves you in front of them, or, gets his henna tattoos, showing them that, oh, you're right. Like, I am valuable and men should treat me like that. Planting the seeds in even young boys. Like, you want young boys there to even see that and say, this is a man. Like, this is the definition of a man.
It was really sweet. This last time we were there, we were in a smaller group, and we were in the red light district in one of the learning centers, and there's a variety of ages, but there were a few boys who were probably in high school, and they all like sat right next to him, and you could see them kind of looking up. It was really sweet. It is nice. I mean, obviously it's nice for them to have a positive role model, even more so locally though, which is another thing I love about our programs, is that, people often ask us too, it's mostly run by local Indians. And I think that's important too, for them to see people who are, local doing it, someone who's near them that can do it, or other survivors who have been through the program. It's not uncommon for people who have gone through our program to stay and work and do things, within it. And that's really cool to see someone else who's gone through it and done it, that it's not just this impossibility, Yeah.
And more often than not, everyone who graduates, however you're going to define that, whether it's like from college or high school or with a vocational education, chooses something in some realm to give back to that community, because they're so dedicated that it's not going to happen to someone else, whether that's a policeman or a nurse or, a teacher. They're all choosing these careers or these next steps because they, they want to give back and show like it can be done.
Yeah. So let's close up by talking about ways people can get involved. Some more statistics, I think, some more numbers. I think to date, one of the first to mention is just that to date, Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation has raised over $425,000, which is crazy. And that's all just through the momentum of harnessing the kind hearts of our yoga communities. And I think it's such a beautiful community to tap into, because yogis are known for really caring and wanting to help and wanting to support. And so, you know, our job is really to tap into those yoga communities to help keep this work going, because it really is, it's endless. But I mean, that's a huge impact, $425,000.
It's huge. It's huge. I mean, especially in India. I mean,
right?
yes. So, you know, overall, we're supporting currently about 2,000 women and children. And that number has grown from about 550 to 2,000 in just a few short years. So it is a huge impact.
It's amazing.
What, you know, and to break that down even more so in Sanagachi, which is the slum community where our learning center sits, and the community that mostly is where we are doing our work. The average family of 7 lives off of $3.40 a day, which is 48 cents per person a day.
Wow.
I can't even park downtown Charleston,
right?
It's like
right.
in a meter. Yeah, you know, like let alone live off of that. And that community specifically, if we were to pluck a girl out of one of those families, we could send her to school for a year for $300 total, which is 83 cents a day.
Which is crazy, because now you have to wrap your head around the fact that, so basically it costs 48 cents per person just to survive, just like daily living requirements per day. But then to send them to school, it basically costs twice that much. So you get an idea of why education is so big in the slums and so difficult to provide in the slums, because there's so much that goes into getting them there, much less that, you know, a lot of times the girls are kept at home to do duties, to do other things that are needed to be done. And like, that's almost twice the cost of living just to go to school. Just to go to school, to go to school is almost twice the cost of living. So it's like, you get why it happens. If you could change your budget and imagine that your monthly living budget, it would cost well, our university is very expensive too, which is a whole nother story. But like, imagine if that's all you had, trying to now raise twice as much to go to school
for multiple children. Yes,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it would feel like an impossibility, which is where we get into those moments of desperation, which is why the boys are favored to go to school over the girls, why the girls, you know, are so much more vulnerable to some form of trafficking.
Right.
Because that feels like an impossibility.
Yeah. So we're starting to get into ways you can support, and we're kind of talking about in the realm of donations, for those of you who are interested in supporting Seva. What that basically means is that $25 a month would support the vocational training of one girl. And these are girls who are under 18. So this is primary school. So $25 a month or $300 a year would support their school sponsorship, would keep them in school, would keep one girl in school. And for girls over 18, we also have vocational trainings. And I think it's 500 or something for the vocational trainings. Is that right?
Yes. The vocational trainings are more like 500 to send one person to a 6-month program. And, you know, the 2 examples that I absolutely love is the hospitality and baking and our computers program. Because what we're actually seeing is after those 6 months, we're actually getting job placements in income sustaining careers or positions, which is the whole goal, right? Which is, bridging the gap between, okay, now you have an education, how do you get into a job, and the cycle of exploitation ends. So $500 per person for 6 months for a vocational education.
And obviously it depends, like we said, we are flexible in an individualized program. So, if they wanted to go to college or law school or some other vocational training, obviously that's going to be different. But for something like that, it is about $500 to $700 for a vocational training program, which gives them a sustainable livelihood for the rest of their lives, which is pretty cool. And I mean, compared to going to college in America, that's like a drop in the bucket. So it's pretty amazing how far the money goes there.
It is amazing. And, on our network for Good System, which is where we all donate and where Seva's campaign sits, you can choose to either give that once or you can give it monthly. So if $25 a month feels more accessible than a chunk of $300, that option is available. But as you can see from what we're saying,
or if you just have 25, I mean, like even just 25 is a really big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Like we'll feed the family for the month. Yeah. No, it's true.
I mean, I just think the number breakdown helps people realize that like every dollar really matters. So, if you're someone who struggles with your own budget, we all have our financial, struggles and things that we are working with. And so, even $5, $25, like the beauty of working with a small nonprofit like Seva is that every dollar goes straight into our programs. And so it really has a huge impact. So, anything that is reasonable for you is really...
And two things. Also, if you're listening and you have $1 million to give, we accept that. Like, we'll take whatever you want.
Right? Imagine how far, like, wait, weren't our renovations for that whole building, wasn't it $100,000? Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it was like 150. I went over budget by like 50,000. But
it was aiming for 100.
Yes, we renovated, furnished a heritage building and kept it in its original state, wood and marble and everything, for 150,000. 10,000 square feet, 23 rooms. Yeah.
But now we have that. Like it's now a thing we can use forever, potentially, hopefully.
And I think when you're there, this makes a lot of sense. But just to reiterate it, it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to send someone to a computer program, but it's not just a computer program, because you walk into that center and they have access to life skills classes, English classes. We do financial literacy workshops, human rights workshops. So anyone that's in any program in that center is also gaining all this access and information. So it's very much a holistic experience, so that when you do come out of that 6 months, you're full of knowledge and information and skill sets that you did not have before.
Okay, one last stat. You told me before this, actually, we were chatting a little bit. Can you say the thing about the black market professions? Because I think this is, I know we've kind of passed. I'm going backtracking a little bit, but.
No worries. No, yeah. This has always kind of blown my mind as well. But so on the black market or illegal sale of items, first is drugs, the illegal
most profitable
drugs, and it's most profitable business in the world, right? On the black market, illegal. Next is firearms, but the third most profitable is the sale of human life. And
just crazy.
So often we're like, slavery ended, and I kind of just like, and that's a whole other thing as well. It makes me cringe a little bit, because we have more slaves today than ever in the history of the world. And selling the lives of humans is a profitable business.
Yeah, very profitable and very organized. And it's really exciting to hear that the government is getting involved in a positive way. It really helps me feel good about the impact that all of our nonprofits are having, and social media is having, because I think a lot of that is because of some events that became publicized on social media, which were unfortunate, but also brought a lot of light to the subject. And thank goodness, because now the government is getting involved. So things are happening. And, with all these nonprofits that are doing the work together, every little bit counts. And so we'll just end by talking about the ways that you can support. Obviously, the one was donating. So if you just want to donate money, whether that's $20, 25 for a month to support someone, or five once, or 25 a month, or 300, or if you want to support vocational skills for someone for their lifetime, $500. Whatever it is that you have to give. But there's also, I think a lot of the people in our community are also yoga teachers. Many of them are yoga teachers. So it's been really cool to watch a lot of our teachers who will run donation classes either every so often, or maybe at a certain spot on their schedule, or studio owners who will offer like a class at an off time for maybe a newer teacher or something as a way to get experience, and then give that income to the nonprofit. Some teachers will do workshops by donation, and that might not be giving the whole money to us. I mean, obviously we all need to be sustainable. If you're not sustainable as a teacher, you're not going to be able to help in the future anyways. So, a lot of times the teachers will keep a portion for themselves and be really transparent about what they're donating, what percentage, or that a portion is being donated. We have companies that sell products that have donated a portion of their products to Seva. We have people
company matches.
Company matches. Yep.
Yeah. Like, what company do you work for? Look into their matching program, because even if it's $500, now you've raised $1,000 instead of, you've doubled it,
which has made a huge impact for some people, like who work for bigger companies. Or, if you're really interested in coming and being a big part of it, fundraising on our Network for Good. And this is all on most of this is on our site. So if you go to Yoga Medicine, scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see a link to Seva at the bottom of the page. And that's just the easiest way to get to it if you want to go from there. Everyone's familiar with that site. But you could fundraise and come on our next trip and see the shelters and meet some of the girls doing the work. We always need volunteers. So if you have skills you want to volunteer, especially things like therapy, business skills. What else, Amanda? I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're always just looking for, we had an event for Seva last night, and this is something that we talked about, was that sometimes we feel like, oh, I have to gain a skill to give back. And it's really actually about like looking at yourself and saying, like, what do I currently do? Or what skills do I currently give to the world, or I give to my family? And how can I translate that to giving back? Because so often it is, maybe you are really good at social media, and our girls that are selling jewelry need to get better, and you want to do a social media class. Like, there's just so many ways that you can give back. And because we're a small nonprofit, like, reach out to us and let's brainstorm ideas. And even with the education, if you're like, I want to send one person to college, I just feel really dedicated to that. Like, reach out. I have a list of people that, want to go to college. So I think, like, yeah.
Well, I'll
just say this too.
Oh, go ahead.
So many times people reach out to me in Seva, and it is a yoga community, and they're like, there's just no way I can raise $5,000, nor can I give up a portion of my class. And what I see so often is, like, we cannot underestimate how much we as yoga teachers do touch other people's lives and in the communities in which we serve. Because if you are passionate about it and you're just honest about it, I want to go on this trip, and this, people give, it's unbelievable. And for not to underestimate what you mean to someone else and what they want to give to you specifically.
I mean, it can also just be mentioning it. I mean, obviously in your class, you don't want to get too distracted as a yoga teacher because people are there to practice, but like, just, mentioning, that you work with this nonprofit, and, for people who want to donate, maybe there's just a little donation collection. People have done such a big variety of things. People have hosted huge events where they've talked to local companies to donate wine and things like that, or art, and then, auctioned that stuff off, or trips, or someone I think has, had people who donated their Airbnb, at like an auction, and then fundraised thousands of dollars, you know, so it really is up to you to
Right.
decide what's helpful. We've also had people who were teachers come to India for a couple of months and teach English, or what was the expressive arts? I think a mental health counselor who was teaching expressive arts, which was, you know, really
Yes,
important.
she's there right now, and it's going really well. Yes,
Yeah.
expressive therapeutic release through all different modalities of art, and it's it's really effective and beautiful. And then two of our fellowships, our English fellows, are from your community, Yoga Medicine.
Yeah. So there's lots of ways to get involved. Also, I want to mention, I know we mentioned it earlier, but two really great books to check out. Did you want to mention those really quick? Anjali's and
Yeah,
Pooja's?
so yeah, Pooja is also a part of the yoga medicine community, and she wrote For My Sister, which you can get on Amazon, and we can share that link, which is a really beautiful story of two 15-year-old girls that were sold into a brothel in Samagachi, so in the community that Yoga Medicine Seva does work in. And Sarah, who owns her, or
Oh, yes.
founded Her Future Coalition, co-wrote a book with Anjali, who is a survivor activist, and that's her true story of being sold at 12 and making her way all the way back to Nepal to open a school to educate the youth that that is not the way.
What was the name of that
So,
one?
oh
I
yeah,
forgot.
sorry, standing in the way.
So
So
we'll
For My Sister and Standing in the Way.
mention, was there another one that I'm forgetting? Was that Sarah's first book? Why?
Sarah's first book is This Is No Ordinary Joy, which
Thank you.
shares,
Yes.
yeah, her whole experience and the experience of many others.
Yeah. So those are three really great books. There's a lot of other great books on trafficking, but those are really more directly connected to us. We'll include those in the show notes just as a way to get some more information and of course support our people that we love. So lots of different ways to get involved. Also, you know, just all of the work that you do to spread the word is such a big help, whether that's liking our post on social media or sharing it with someone else. Just spreading the word can be really helpful. So, finding what feels right for you and remembering that you're also a part of the community here. If you are a yoga medicine teacher, if you've ever taken a training with us, if you practice with yoga medicine online, know that a portion of our profits go to support Seva. So, you are a part of our family. So stay in touch and you can watch what's going on the Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation social media site on Instagram. We like to do updates and photos there and little quotes and inspirations. So you can find more information there and stay connected to us. So any last final thoughts, Amanda?
No, I was just going to say sharing is caring. So yeah, reshare those posts and stories, and we're always here to brainstorm and find ways that you feel connected and involved.
I didn't even really mention what you do, but I was going to interject earlier and say Amanda is the brains behind Yoga Medicine Seva. So she really manages all of the inner workings of it. So thank God for Amanda, because I don't know what Seva would do if I hadn't found you.
Oh,
She also does a
thank
lot of
you.
work for Her Future, which is really nice because now we can stay really connected. And, I think at first I was a little like, well, do we need our own person? And now it feels so right and so natural. And you're just so perfect at the job. So just such a huge thank you and
Oh,
gratitude for all you do. And for those of you who are interested in helping, you can reach out to her at seva@yogamedicine.com as well. Again, if you go to yogamedicine.com and scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll find a link to Seva. Is it weird that I don't know the website name for that? Because it's always been on our
yoga
site.
yogamedicineseva.com.
Is that what it
Is
is?
that what
Oh
you mean?
gosh.
Yes,
Yeah.
yogamedicineseva.com. Well, and thank you for saying that. This is a dream job. I never thought that I could do something that I was passionate about on a daily basis, and so it's a dream for me. So thank you to you and to everyone that supports our community.
Yes, and thank you to everyone who supported us in any way, whether that's just liking a post or sending money, small or large, or fundraising, or being in our community. I love our community. I'm so grateful and so proud that we've been able to do so much work and raise so much money. And so I have so much gratitude for yourself and all the companies we work with and all the people who support us. So thank you, Amanda, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Yoga Medicine. If you like the show, please be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you got something out of this episode, please spread the word and share it with a friend. You can find more information, articles, trainings, and classes at yogamedicine.com, or check us out on social media as Yoga Medicine. You can also email us at info@yogamedicine.com. Thank you for being a part of our Yoga Medicine community. We look forward to seeing you again. The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs.